OCR Statistics Bivariate Data 1 Scatter Diagrams. This is video 1.1 on the introduction to bivariate data. Firstly, let's consider what bivariate data means. If we separate out the word, we see that bivariate data means data involving two variables. Not only does it involve two variables, but it's also where each value of one variable is paired with a value of another variable. It's easier to see this in examples. Here we have a table which shows the land area and population of the countries of the world. We've just taken a small section off the top. You can see here that there's clearly two variables. We have population and we have area. And each of these is paired by country. So this data is bivariate. In this example, we have the highest recorded temperature in the home nations. And we also have the rainfall in London by year. So we do have two variables. We have temperature and we have rainfall, but they aren't paired in any meaningful way. Therefore, this data is not bivariate. There are two types of bivariate data, which we're going to consider now. The first one is something called random on non-random. And in this case, only one of the variables can be considered a random variable. This usually occurs when one of the variables, we call this the independent variable, is controlled by an experimenter. It's also sometimes called the control variable. The other one, the dependent variable, is something that is measured. For example, a horticulturalist is investigating the yield of tomato plants when different levels of fertilizer are used. This is bivariate data because we're looking at yield and we're looking at levels of fertilizer. So we have two variables and they're paired by individual plant. This is also random on non-random, and that's because the level of fertilizer is controlled and the yield is something that is measured. The other type of bivariate data is what we call random on random, and in this case both variables can be considered random variables. Neither is controlled. For example, a sample of Year 13 students are taken and each student's height and weight is recorded. This data is bivariate because we have height and we have weight and they're paired by individual student. This case is random on random. That's because both variables are random variables. We aren't controlling the height or the weight because it's a sample that's been taken. Let's consider some examples now and determine whether we think that they are random on non-random or random on random. In this case, we have a random sample of trees, and the girth and the height of each individual tree is being measured. Because we're taking a random sample in this case, and neither the girth or the height of the tree is something that is controlled, this is random on random. A marine biologist is studying the distribution of a species of crab in coastal rock pools. In a suitable location, she randomly picks a sample of areas with 1 square meter. For each area, she then records the distance from the sea along with the number of crabs. So there are two variables, are the distance from the sea and the number of crabs. Because again she has randomly selected the areas and neither the distance from the sea or the number of crabs have been controlled, this is random on random. Finally, a marine biologist is studying the distribution of species of crab in coastal rock pools. In a suitable location, she picks a sample of areas each of which is a multiple of 5 from the sea. She then records the distance along with the number of crabs that she can find in that area. So at first glance this sounds very, very familiar to part B, but in this case she's actually selecting the areas, so she's in control of the distance from the sea. So this case is random on non-random. This was 1.1 Introduction to Bivariate Data, and the next video, 1.2, is on scatter diagrams.